Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, my friends. This is Javier with The Real Javier Novoa, a channel, a platform, and a modality where we apply the principles of philosophy, spirituality, mysticism, and business, and good planning and realization to rapid lifestyle transformation, ladies and gentlemen. It's about getting you free from a job and a boss, or even getting you free from a business that's taking up all of your time and making you feel like you have to have your schedule structured in a certain way, and getting you free from that and giving you the freedom to follow your true purpose of being, your true reason for coming, ladies and gentlemen. I was excited when I looked at some of our comments. In fact, this video is going to be in direct answer to a question by one of our subscribers in our comments. And please keep those coming, because I love getting questions. They help us actually determine the way that we need to take the channel. They help us determine how I can best serve you. That's all I'm here for. As a person of service, to get you the information that you need, and most importantly, to train you in applying these very simple principles so that you can get to wherever it is that you want to go, that you can cross the finish line. But I was not so much surprised, but impressed that many of our subscribers now are creative people, and they're creative people of repute. I have musicians following us. Indeed, the questioner for the video today is a great musician. And I was just amazed by the peacefulness and the resonance of some of the songs on this person's channel. And there are also artists, there are philosophers, there are programmers. You know, I was surprised actually in the beginning of the channel when I first started doing our videos, like in the first weeks. The first people to come into contact with my channel were gamers, actually. And I'm not sure how the algorithm got my channel into gaming. You see, I haven't played a video game since I was probably 10 years old. I'm not a gamer, although many people have told me that I look like someone who would be a gamer. But it makes sense, ladies and gentlemen, because these people actually have it down. Whether it's gamers, whether it's creative types, these people spend a lot of time in the right brain, and they spend a lot of time disconnected from what others would call reality. But it's not reality. It's actually just a small part of reality. It's a film roll. They understand this stuff intuitively, and they're trying to get an edge. And it's the principles and the practice in this channel that's going to get you to the edge, and that's going to take you to the top of whatever profession you're in. Especially the creative professions, especially the arts and performance and music. Although I would argue that business is more arts than science. And in fact, Peter Drucker said as much when he spoke about management and so forth. And the thing is that, like we've said in other videos, and you'll get this analogy very well with music. For example, many of the great musicians never studied musical theory. And you can ask the musicians who follow our channel. But the ones who have studied musical theory will just tell you the confines and the structures within which you have to perform. But it will not tell you the arrangement of that. And indeed, it will give you certain borders that in certain circumstances you can cross and break the rules. Like I remember there was a rock guitarist that I don't remember what his name was. I think it was rock or heavy metal, that learned how to play the guitar simply from the neck of the guitar, and would simply play the guitar from the neck of the guitar. Of course, the rules say that no, you have to use one hand on the neck of the guitar, the other hand on the actual body of the guitar. Forgive my ignorance on the terminology of this. But he didn't know that rule, so therefore he broke it. But the point is that all these disciplines, in business and investing, I used this example a few videos ago in investing. You see, the rules are all out there now because you don't necessarily even have to go to university to learn all of the theory. It's all free on the internet for the most part. You can pay for a structured class, and when you pay for courses even on the internet, of which, by the way, we're making one, you pay for the structure, and of course that structure has a lot of value. But you can find all the information if you spend a little bit of time, a little bit of research. You can structure it yourself. And you can know all this information. So you have to assume that in the top percentiles of these professions, whether it be music, whether it be investing, everyone already has all of the information. So what's going to give you the edge? Well, it's like in military strategy. All of these great military strategists like Napoleon and so on and so forth, and like all the generals whom Napoleon was facing off against, they all knew the best parts of military theory of their time because they had all studied at the finest institutions and so on and so forth. But what gave Napoleon that edge? It was something more than the knowing. Yes, he had the knowing of the facts, but he transcended that and he tapped into his right brain like we teach you how to do in this channel. And he focused and he daydreamed, and at least while he was focusing upon his art, he kept himself in a high vibration, or rather, he was kept in a high vibration, and therefore he outperformed his peers, and so on in athletics and so on. And I'd love to do an interview with some of the musicians or artists that were watching or that are watching my channel to sort of pick their brains about this, and they will probably tell you the same thing that I'm telling you. Point is, using your right brain is going to get you an edge. Musicians and artists know that. That's why so many subscribers are creative types, and we're glad to have you on. We're glad to have this energy that you bring, and thank you for your questions. We are going to answer a question today, and we're going to tie it in with the broad framework in which we're making these videos. But first, ladies and gentlemen, as always, I'd like to ask you, if you've not subscribed to the channel, please hit the subscribe button below, because not only will you be joining a community of master manifestors, and there really is scientific, peer-reviewed research and proof that explains and goes into how people getting together, no matter what their location, so I could be in Dallas and you could be in Paris, but us getting together energetically and focused causes a field of energy that surrounds us and surrounds a great part of the area outside of us and the area that transverses us, so to speak, the area between us. And that energetic field has a great effect. Joe Dispenza has shown this. Greg Braden has shown this. By joining our channel, by the simple act of subscribing to our channel, you're contributing your energy to our energy pool in a positive version of what Vadim Zeland calls a pendulum, because everything's a pendulum. A pendulum is simply an aggregation or an aggregate of energy, and it starts to swing according to its own momentum. Well, our channel is becoming a pendulum for good. We're going to be able to influence more people, and that's the second part of this. Not only will you become a member of that group and you'll be able to benefit from our energy, we'll be able to benefit from your energy, but you'll help us get the word out. You'll help us make this pendulum stronger so that it can touch others, so that it can touch more lives, because, ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you, the things that are coming up on this film roll, we're all going to need this information, these principles, and an application of them. As we always say, the times call for that. So I will give you a second to hit the subscribe button below. Thank you so much for subscribing. So, we've been talking about all week, and congratulations, by the way, it's Wednesday, so we've been doing a great job. Only a few more days to go for this week, and we'll have netted it, ladies and gentlemen. Of course, we are netting it. But this week and the last week, we've been going into a series of videos, if you've not seen, on strategic planning. And this is a path whereby you can harness your right brain and left brain, basically filtering your right brain through your left brain, and we're going to talk about that more in other videos. And you can have a laser-like focus on your desire, and you can bring it about in your experience, or it shall be brought about in your experience quicker than you ever thought possible. And that's because of marshaling the forces of focus. And we did a video about how to get your desire in 30 seconds, how to manifest it in 30 seconds. And I'd recommend you all watch that because I believe it is a great and prescient video about this process when we were getting started in the strategic planning process. But I talked about staying in flow and actually taking actions that would increase the likelihood that you would get into flow. And the questioner asked, he said, please make a video about the way to be and live after doing inner work. And of course, there's no end to doing inner work, my friends. The inner work is the work. And why is that? Because as Krishnamurti said, the inner is the outer. Okay? As it said in the Kybalion, as above, so below. And of course, above is the inner in the great traditions, and below is the outer. And as the Bible says, what you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven. What's bound in heaven shall be bound on earth. So it's all inner. There's no distinction. So any work that you're doing to a certain extent is inner work. The only question is, are you conscious that it's inner work? And you don't have to be conscious of it, just like as Abraham Hicks says, you don't have to be conscious of gravity. If you're not conscious of gravity, that doesn't mean that you're going to fly off the earth. However, it's a lot more fun, and it's a lot more powerful to consciously harness that. For example, what happened when we consciously harnessed the atom? Probably not a very good thing, but all will agree a very powerful reaction. So, keep that in mind. It's all about knowing what you're doing. So, is the sense of relief that comes with alpha and affirmations carried throughout the day? And that depends, my friend. First of all, here's where people get messed up. Abraham Hicks makes this very fine distinction. First of all, relief is a great thing, but you're already sort of diluting the vibration by relief. Why is that? Because, as Abraham Hicks says, and I use Abraham Hicks a lot because she just gives the best analogies. I haven't seen anyone who has been able to surpass her ability to distill these metaphysical concepts down to great analogies that everyone can understand. So, she said relief is hitting yourself on the head with a club and then stopping. Okay? That's relief. So the question is, if you want to get into the more refined aspects of this, the first question you should ask yourself is, why have I been hitting myself in the head with a club all day? And the invariable answer is, you didn't get on that grid. You didn't get in that state of relief, or what we can call that state of neutral or contentment, early enough. And the way you start your day is often the way you end your day. Now, that's not so for us, because we're master manifestors. We can, and indeed it's fun to, go off the path, then get back on the path, knowing you're off, as Krishnamurti said, getting back on. But the first thing to do if you want to feel this sense of alpha and be in flow, because all alpha is a way to get relief, or to temporarily stop everything and get into neutral, and then have the best chance for getting into flow. And we'll talk a little bit about flow, but flow is not something that you have conscious control over. You can't get into flow just because I say I want to get into flow. No, flow is something that happens as a consequence of being in that state of receptivity, what Abraham Hicks calls the receptive mode. And the more you're in receptive mode, the more you will get into these periods of flow. But I hope you understand me just a little bit. Start early in the morning so that you don't have to have relief. However, you will be getting into situations where you get out of that receptive mode. And indeed, that's not a bad thing, because that's the way you create. And then you can get back into relief. And that's where this getting into alpha really helps. You can get into relief, you can get into neutral, and then you can basically direct your path where it's going to go for the rest of the day. But the best way is not getting there. That doesn't mean get crazy about it and try to shelter yourself. This is a very fine distinction, and many won't understand me. And if you don't understand it intellectually, that's all right, because these are not intellectual processes. These are knowings, and these are doings. So just take whatever I say that resonates with you and run with it, and anything that doesn't resonate with you, leave it, and you'll understand it more later. You'll contemplate it. But for the rest of the question here, the questioner is asking here, it seems a bit unnatural to always be in a bliss state throughout the day. Are practices like this all we must do frequently? And bless his heart. You see, he's creating a problem from bliss. And that's the human experience, isn't it? Bliss was too much of a problem for us. That's why all of these talks about enlightenment and moksha and nirvana and attaining state of enlightenment, I think they missed the mark. I think they missed the point. Here's why. Because first of all, I don't have any idea what that is, first of all. Because the moment we stop growing, the moment we're in full perfection, the moment we stop changing, and changing implies imperfection because there's something to change to that ostensibly is more perfect. The moment we leave that, we cease to exist. And if we don't exist, then what is? Think about it. So I set all of these discussions of enlightenment aside, and you can watch my video on the very early days. I will link it here on my spiritual rant where I went into that. Being the perfect person, enlightenment, the sage of stoicism and so on and so forth, trying to be perfect here so that we get to heaven, I think these are all placeholders, and they're good to get us started down this path, but they very soon disintegrate. And I know that's a little bit of a tangent, but it reminded me of that. Now, the second aspect is we're all here, and we know that we're not separate from the divine. We know that from the scale of being, with divinity at the top and physicality at the bottom, that we talked about in the beginning of this channel. So we're all one with that divine. So why are we here? That's the question. Why are we here? Like the questioner says, is it natural to stay in bliss all the time? I'm bored by staying in bliss all the time. No, it's not natural. That's why we came to shake things up. We came to solve problems. We came to grow. So get used to it. Now, within that, this is another thing that Abraham Hicks goes into beautifully in her lectures, in her seminars. She says, I'm trying to recall the exact words, but she says, there's a gradation in the vortex. And what she calls the vortex are those positive emotions. Probably what my friend here describes as bliss. And it's not bliss because the alpha is not bliss. To me, bliss implies the absolute top of that emotional scale, the complete losing of yourself, complete ecstasy. Alpha is not that. Alpha is simply a feeling of neutral. Okay? Alpha is simply being empty of all desires and all fears, and simply being in that mid-state of neutral. In fact, you couldn't stand bliss for long periods of time because it's very hard on the human system. You see, we talked about in a previous video on the emotional scale, the opposites of the emotional scale present exactly the same physically. And you can go back and watch that video. Perhaps we'll find it and put in the links. But just think about this with me for a second. Excitement and fear. Think about how both of those emotions physically present. Okay? They almost present the exact same way. The heart's beating fast, deep breathing. The only thing that separates them is the thought that says this is negative and this is positive. And of course, we went into that. So, we get into extremes, and that is what life is about. Enjoying those extremes and getting to those extremes, having fun and playing in those extremes, but we cannot stay in those extremes. Rather, we have to have a point of return, a point of neutrality. And usually that point is contentment, or a little bit over contentment, or it's a little bit under contentment. That's boredom and frustration. What we train you to do in this channel is to have your reversion point or your midpoint be at least at contentment. And when you're in that, it's very easy for you to get in those higher emotions. Now, in the vortex, as Abraham Hicks says, there's gradation. So there's not only bliss. You can go from bliss to knowing. And knowing is still on that same level of joy and love, but it's a very different set of circumstances than bliss. And just think about it. Bliss is like, knowing is like, but it's still a very good feeling state. So you're never going to stay in a state of bliss. The point is, I believe, dear questioner, is that you don't have to worry about the negative aspects of being high on the emotional scale. Just get yourself there. And that's where we go into flow. Now, if you're on these high states of the emotional scale, depending on what you're doing and what you're engaging with, flow will take you. And when flow takes you, it's like a video game. And I think those who play video games can explain it better. But when he gets one of those rewards or chips, and then he's like, bah, 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 and he just starts moving very quickly, and you're not even doing it. You're being moved. That's the way flow is. But the only way to get into flow is to be at least at neutral and in those higher emotional states. So, my friend, don't worry too much about it. Don't worry too much about, is it natural to be in bliss? You can be in bliss as much as you want. You can be in joy as much as you want. You came for that, my friend. Don't worry, because life itself is going to dip you. And of course, we did come for the dips as well, because the dips are what teaches us what bliss is. For example, you wouldn't know the difference between bliss and depression unless you've dipped to depression, or at least close to it. I hope you understand me just a little bit. It's the nature of the game, ladies and gentlemen. So don't worry too much about that stuff. Also, I have videos going into how feelings really don't matter. Of course they do matter. But when you start making feelings a problem, and you start trying too hard to get into that positive state, and when you start asking yourself, what if I'm too much in that, then that means your feelings are simply becoming another impediment or another resistance. It doesn't even matter how you feel, because you can leave the game anytime you want. That's the primary reason why we teach you to go into alpha. Because when you go into alpha, you've left the game. It's like being in a stadium and playing a game and then taking a time out. So you can take a time out from that game anytime you want. And that ties into what we're talking about in this planning process. Because during the planning process, what most people do while planning, what most business types do, is they worry about it. They rack their brains. Oh, I've got to come up with this idea, and I have this deadline, and so on and so forth. The moment you get to that, realize it's a game, realize it doesn't matter what you do, because you're outside of the game, you're greater than the game, and take that time out and get out of the game. And that's what the majority of these early phases of the strategic planning processes are going to do. You're going to dip your feet in the game just a little bit. You're going to try to get a handhold or a foothold in the issue that you're trying to attain on this film roll or in your experience. And then when it starts to feel bad, you're going to retreat. Basically, you're quote-unquote sending in spies, if you want to get into the older military literature and so on and so forth that we use as metaphors and so on and so forth. So he asks, are practices like this all we must do frequently? Again, the practices, my friend, don't matter either. That's the secret. These practices are just here as tools to get you started, and what you have to do is you have to use the practices and the processes that work for you, just like a good chef. He has tools and pots and pans and cooking equipment, and he learns how to use them, and he uses the ones that suit him, and he leaves the rest. That's what you have to do with the tools that we give on this channel, or the tools and processes that any of the great spiritual teachers like Abraham Hicks, like Bashar give. They're only for you to use if they help you get higher on that emotional scale, and if they help you get yourself out of your way. But remember, you are the tool. You are the process. And whenever you feel lazy about doing any of the processes or using any of the tools, that means it's time to take a step back. That means it's time to remember who you are. That means it's time to get into alpha, and that means it's time to declare, I am it, and I'm outside of the game. I am the game, and for right now, I'm taking my seat on the throne, so to speak, of this, and realizing my own divinity, my own oneness, and my own knowing. And it's that knowing that's then going to cause all of the circumstances around you to change, your context, and before you know it, you're going to be on another film roll. Remember, this is a game. Even the processes are the game. The only thing that matters is knowing who you are, and the rest of this is just discussion. It's fun discussion. It's discussions that we're going to be having for as long as we can, but it's only discussion. Remember, you make the rules. As Seth said, the only rule is you make the rules. The only process is you are the process. So thank you for the question. Thank you guys for sharing the videos. Thanks for commenting on the videos. We appreciate and love you all. And I am doing coaching calls. You can email me and we can do a coaching call where I can tailor a custom-made plan for your rapid lifestyle transformation, which means my guarantee to you is being free from a Boston job within 6 months to a year, getting ready for the exciting future that awaits you when you start to create your own masterpieces, when you draft your own plans, and when you craft your own schedule. I will put my email in the description. So thank you guys so much for watching. We will be coming back tomorrow with more details in the strategic planning process. Until very soon, this is Javier. With much love and appreciation, I'll see you tomorrow.